Sergeant James Chen moved through the aftermath of the skirmish with practiced efficiency, checking for wounded among the debris and damaged structures. The engagement had been typical for Vex Prime: violent, chaotic, and ultimately inconclusive. Human colonial security forces had clashed with raiders from an unidentified faction in one of the contested border zones, where multiple species competed for control. James was 28, 6 years into military medical service, known for his calm under pressure and his absolute commitment to treating anyone who needed medical attention, regardless of which side they'd been on. Once combat ended, everyone became a patient rather than an enemy. He found her partially buried under rubble from a collapsed structure. An alien woman, clearly injured, bleeding from multiple wounds, one leg trapped under debris, conscious but in significant pain. She was Sithari, a species James recognized as uncommon and reclusive. James immediately shifted into medic mode. He carefully moved the debris to free her leg, assessed her injuries, began treatment. The woman watched him with intensity that suggested she was assessing him as much as he was assessing her injuries. Her wounds were serious but not immediately life-threatening if treated properly. James worked with practiced efficiency, stopping bleeding, stabilizing the damaged leg, treating what appeared to be a concussion, administering pain medication. Throughout treatment, he talked to her in a calm, steady voice, explaining what he was doing, asking questions to assess her consciousness and cognitive function, treating her exactly as he'd treat any injured person. The woman seemed surprised. She asked in accented but clear standard why he was helping her. He was human, she was Sithari, and their peoples had no formal alliance. In this region, it would be more common to leave an injured enemy to their fate. James's response was matter of fact. "I'm a medic, you're injured. That's all the reason I need. The skirmish is over, which means combat rules no longer apply and medical ethics do. I don't care about politics when someone is bleeding in front of me." As James worked on bandaging a particularly nasty wound on her shoulder, the woman studied him. Finally she asked, "Do you realize, human, that I'm not an ordinary person?" James paused briefly, glanced at her face, then returned to bandaging. "I realize you're a person who's injured and in pain. That's what matters right now. Everything else can wait until you're stable." The woman was clearly taken aback. "I am Sithari High Command, a member of the ruling caste with significant authority and power. My presence on this border world was secret. My capture or death could have major political implications. The raiders who attacked were specifically trying to kill or capture me." James absorbed this while finishing the bandage. "That's concerning from a political perspective, and we'll need to address your security situation once you're stable. But it doesn't change the immediate medical priorities. You're still bleeding, you still have a probable concussion, and your leg still needs proper stabilization." He continued working with the same calm focus. The woman seemed genuinely shocked by his complete indifference to her revealed status. She was accustomed to people reacting to her identity with fear, respect, ambition, or calculation. James was treating her exactly the same way after learning who she was as he had before, as a patient who needed medical care. Once he'd stabilized her injuries enough for transport, he called for evacuation. The response team arrived with questions about the Sithari woman's identity and status. James deflected these. His patient needed proper medical facility treatment, and interrogations could wait until she'd received that care. The woman, whose name James learned was Kira Velshara, was evacuated to the human colonial medical facility where James worked. Her presence created immediate complications. Various military and diplomatic officials wanted to question her about what she was doing in human territory, what the attack meant, and what the political implications were. James, as her treating medic, ran interference on many of these attempts. He invoked medical authority. His patient was still recovering from significant injuries and wasn't stable enough for interrogation. He'd notify relevant authorities when she was medically cleared, but until then she was under his medical care and protection. This created friction with military intelligence and diplomatic representatives who thought James didn't understand the significance of who Kira was. James understood perfectly. He just prioritized his patients' medical welfare over their political agendas. Kira observed all of this from her medical bed with growing fascination. She was accustomed to being treated as a valuable asset, a dangerous threat, or a political opportunity. James treated her as a patient whose medical needs came first. Over the days of her initial recovery, James provided ongoing medical care and also served as her primary contact with the outside world. He explained where she was, what the political situation looked like, and what options she had once recovered. He was honest and direct, not trying to manipulate or extract information. Kira started asking James questions about himself, his background, his reasons for becoming a medic, his perspectives on border region politics. James answered honestly, but didn't volunteer more than asked. He was naturally private and saw these conversations as part of patient care, rather than as opportunities to build personal connection. But Kira was building connection whether James intended it or not. She was learning that his calm indifference to her status wasn't because he didn't understand politics. It was because he genuinely believed that medical ethics transcended political considerations, and he had the integrity to act on that belief even when it created professional problems. 1 week after the initial incident, Kira was stable enough that James could no longer justify blocking official questioning. Before the interrogations began, Kira told James something important. His decision to treat her without regard for political implications, to prioritize her medical needs over potential advantages, had created a personal debt according to Sithari cultural traditions. James's response was characteristic. I wasn't trying to create debt or obligation. I was just doing my job as a medic. I don't expect or want anything from you beyond your making a full recovery. This response again surprised and intrigued Kira. The official questioning revealed that Kira had been on Vex Prime as part of a secret diplomatic mission to explore potential alliance with human colonial forces. The Sithari were reassessing their strategic positions, and Kira had been tasked with determining whether humans would make reliable partners. The attack on her was by a faction opposed to any Sithari-human alliance. This created significant political implications. Sithari-human alliance could shift power balances in the entire region. In a private conversation after the interrogations, Kira told James she was going to recommend that the Sithari government proceed with alliance negotiations, and specifically recommend that James be part of the human delegation. Your approach to my treatment, the complete disregard for my status in favor of just seeing me as a person who needed help, demonstrated qualities valuable in genuine partnerships: integrity, directness, and ability to prioritize what actually matters over what's politically convenient. James was initially resistant to being pulled into diplomatic roles. He was a medic, not a diplomat. But his superiors saw the value in Kira's recommendation. She was offering an inside track to Sithari leadership, and she specifically wanted James involved. They convinced James to accept a role as medical liaison. He wouldn't lead negotiations, but he'd be present as a bridge between human and Sithari medical and humanitarian perspectives. Over the following months, James became involved in preliminary alliance discussions. Kira specifically included him in planning sessions, asked for his perspective, and treated his input as valuable even though he had no formal diplomatic training. James also learned more about who Kira actually was. She was a member of the Sithari ruling council, one of 7 individuals who collectively governed the entire Sithari civilization. She had authority equivalent to heads of state. The fact that she'd been personally conducting secret diplomatic reconnaissance spoke to how seriously the Sithari were considering the alliance. During these months, James and Kira developed a relationship difficult to categorize. It was professional in that they worked together on alliance negotiations. But it was also personal. They had regular private conversations, had developed easy rapport, and there was mutual respect beyond just professional collaboration. Kira continued to be fascinated by James's approach. He treated her the same way he'd treated her when she was an injured patient, directly, honestly, without adjusting his behavior based on her status. In meetings with Sithari representatives accustomed to elaborate formal protocols, James just talked to them normally. This initially caused friction, but Kira actively supported his approach, explaining to her fellow Sithari that his directness was valuable precisely because it cut through political posturing. 6 months after the initial incident, preliminary alliance negotiations had progressed to formal agreements being drafted. During this time, Kira admitted to James that their initial encounter had affected her profoundly. "I've spent my entire adult life being treated as Kira Velshara, member of the ruling council first, and as an individual person second. Even close associates relate to me primarily through the lens of my position. You treated me as just a person who needed help, and you continued to treat me that way even after learning who I was. That reminded me of something I'd almost forgotten, that I was more than just my role." But James's response revealed his perspective. "I grew up in contexts where medical care was separated from political considerations. Applying that principle to you didn't feel like a choice. It felt like the obvious right thing to do." But this conversation marked a shift in their relationship. They acknowledged, at least to each other, that what they had went beyond just professional collaboration. There was genuine personal connection based on mutual respect and on Kira having been seen as a person rather than a position. The formal alliance between Sithari and human colonial forces was established 1 year after James treated Kira's injuries. As part of implementation, Kira requested James be assigned as permanent liaison between Sithari medical operations and human colonial forces. This gave James official position to work directly with Sithari institutions, while maintaining his connection to human military medical services. The work was genuinely meaningful. The Sithari had advanced medical knowledge that could benefit human populations. It also meant James and Kira continued to work closely together. 2 years after their initial encounter, Kira made a decision that surprised many within Sithari government. She formally acknowledged James as her bonded partner according to Sithari custom. For a member of the ruling council to bond with a human was unprecedented and politically complicated. Kira's justification was both cultural and personal. Culturally, she cited the life debt created when James treated her injuries. Sithari tradition held that such debts could form the foundation of bonded partnerships. Personally, she stated that James had proven himself worthy through his integrity, directness, and consistent ability to see her as a person rather than just as her position. James was initially uncertain. He cared deeply for Kira but was concerned about political implications and whether he could fulfill expectations. Kira addressed these concerns directly. The bonding would formalize what already exists, a genuine partnership based on mutual respect. The political implications exist regardless, so that shouldn't prevent acknowledging what's real between us. As for expectations, I don't expect you to become someone different. I value exactly who you are." But James accepted the bonding, and they navigated the complexities of making their partnership work across significant differences in their positions and backgrounds. The story ended 5 years after their initial encounter. James reflected on how a routine medical response, treating an injured person in a skirmish's aftermath, had completely changed his life. He'd acted according to principles he'd held since becoming a medic, not thinking about political implications.